I wasn't meant to hear it. That conversation wasn't for my ears, but fate has a strange way of peeling back the curtains we pretend don't exist. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the sun had dipped just low enough behind the maple tree in the yard to cast long shadows through the living room blinds. I sat in my worn armchair, wrapped in my favorite faded shawl, listening to the comforting tick of the grandfather clock and the slow hum of silence. My daughter, Heather, had just visited half an hour, tops. She brought me groceries, kissed my forehead, and told me to rest. I remember smiling at her retreating back, believing, stupidly, that her love was genuine. She left her phone on the kitchen counter, a sleek little think pink case with that silly heart-shaped pop socket. It buzzed once, then again. I didn't mean to go near it, but the third buzz was followed by a soft voice, already mid-conversation. The call had been answered, accidentally, and that's when I heard it. "Yeah, I'm just waiting for her to croak." Heather's voice spilled out of the speaker, clear as day, tinged with a laugh I didn't recognize. "She's got that heart thing, you know? Doctor says maybe months. A year, if I'm unlucky." There was a pause. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the phone, unsure if I'd heard right. Then came the second voice, one I didn't know. A man. Cold, clipped. "So you're really going through with it?" Moving her into that dump. Heather chuckled again. "Next week. I found a place. Looks clean enough for what she needs. Besides, the house is already in my name. Once she's out, I can finally breathe." I stood there, heart pounding, breath caught in my throat like a fishhook. My knees buckled, and I sank into the nearest chair, hand clamped over my mouth. I must have listened to another 2 minutes of that sickening exchange. Heather listing plans for my house, the renovations she'd already scheduled, the way she was going to tell people I needed more care than she could provide. Lies, all of it. Fabrications built with the same lips that kissed my cheek every Sunday. She hung up, the screen going dark. I sat in silence for what must have been 20 minutes before I found the strength to move. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone and placed it gently back on the counter where she'd left it, like it was something poisonous. Every instinct in me screamed to confront her, scream, cry, beg for an explanation. But I didn't, because I knew something Heather didn't. She thought I was weak, frail, half-blind. She didn't know that my mind still worked sharp as a tack. She forgot the woman who raised her, who ran a household alone after her father died in that car wreck. She underestimated me. That, I would make sure, was her greatest mistake. I spent the next few hours reviewing everything. My finances, the deed, my will. I called Helen, my old friend from church who'd worked in real estate her whole life, and asked her to lunch the next day. And I began to plan. When Heather came back that evening, flustered and apologetic about leaving her phone, I smiled. I asked how her day was. I even offered her tea. She said yes. She had no idea I'd heard a single word. For the rest of the week, I played my role well. I limped a little more, made vague comments about forgetting the kettle on, asked her to write things down so I'd remember them later. I saw the relief in her eyes, the self-assured smugness. She was already calculating how easy it would be to push me into that clean enough care facility and strip the walls from this house, like peeling old wallpaper. On Friday, I called my grandson Caleb, 18, tall, gentle, too good for the chaos around him. We hadn't seen each other in months, not since Heather decided my house was too far from his school. But I still remembered the way he used to climb into my lap, even at 10, and beg for one more story. He answered in 2 rings. "Grandma." "Hi, baby," I said, my voice calm. "I need a favor." That weekend, Caleb came to visit. He brought a small black notebook and a cheap recorder, like I asked. We sat for hours, me pouring everything out: dates, conversations, paperwork Heather forged or pushed past me, and of course, every word I heard on that phone. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, and I was going to make sure the world saw it. Caleb helped me document everything. He helped me skin bank statements, copies of the deed I still had. He even dug up texts Heather had sent him, messages that painted me as a burden, a woman slipping into senility. I told him not to hate her. I don't know if that was for his sake or mine. By the following Thursday, I had everything I needed. Heather arrived that morning with a smile on her face and a white envelope in her hand. "Mom," she said, "I found this lovely place for you. They have bingo nights. You'll love it." I took the envelope, smiled back, and said, "Why don't you sit, sweetheart? I've got something for you too." She sat, I reached into the drawer beside my chair and handed her a folder. Legal papers. Copies of everything she thought she'd hidden. Behind me, Caleb emerged, holding the recorder. Heather's face went pale. "You forgot to turn off your phone, darling," I said gently. And I heard everything. For the first time, she was speechless. "I don't want to fight," I added. "But I also won't be discarded like yesterday's newspaper." Heather stood up, flustered, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't understand." "No," I interrupted, voice firm. "You don't." That night, she left without another word. Caleb stayed with me. We had soup and bread, watched old movies, and when I finally went to bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. It wasn't over, but the first move was mine, and I wasn't done fighting. I woke up the next morning with sunlight pouring through the window, warm and golden. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't afraid of what the day might bring. Caleb had made coffee and was tinkering in the kitchen. The boy was always thoughtful, like his grandfather used to be. It struck me how kindness skipped a generation. Heather didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. She went silent. Part of me expected her to storm back in, furious and indignant, demanding how I dared to record her, to dig through the papers she thought I never looked at. But I think she knew deep down that the truth was a tide she couldn't stop once it began to rise. That Sunday, I put on my good church dress and went to Pastor Helen's service. The same Helen who had lunch with me earlier that week, and who'd seen enough ugly family estate cases in her lifetime to know this one was going to get messy. After the service, she slipped me a business card. "Lawyer friend of mine," she whispered. "Not flashy, but tough as nails. You're going to need her." I didn't waste time. On Tuesday, I met with the lawyer Miriam Reyes, a small woman with fierce eyes and a voice that cut through nonsense like a blade. She listened, nodded, read every document I brought. And when I told her about the call I'd overheard, she looked me straight in the eyes. "We can make a case," she said. "Financial elder abuse, attempted fraudulent transfer of property, misrepresentation of medical capacity. It won't be pretty, but it's real. And you have proof." I sat quietly for a moment. Then I nodded. "I don't want to ruin her life. She's still my daughter. But I won't let her ruin mine either." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, though I was, in ways I couldn't quite name, but because of everything I kept remembering. I kept seeing her as a little girl again, chasing butterflies in the yard, pressing dandelions into the pages of my cookbooks. How did that little girl become a woman who'd count the days until her mother died? And then I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. This wasn't sudden. This cruelty didn't arrive overnight. It had grown in quiet moments. In the way she'd begun ignoring my calls. The way she'd snapped at me for forgetting things I hadn't forgotten. The way she told Caleb not to bother visiting. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And I had let it happen. Wednesday morning, I called Heather. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. "We need to talk, sweetheart. I'm going to handle this legally, but I'd still like to speak to you first, mother to daughter." No reply. Friday, I got a letter. Not from her, but from a lawyer. Her lawyer. A letter filled with careful, cold language. It accused me of confusion and stress-related delusions. It said Heather had acted with love and care, and that any insinuation otherwise was a gross mischaracterization. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in Miriam's growing file. The next week was quiet but heavy, like waiting for a storm you couldn't see, only feel in the air. Caleb came off and skipped football practice once, just to make me tea and watch old cooking shows. One afternoon, I looked at him and said, "You ever feel like you're waking up from a long, slow nightmare?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But waking up is the start of fixing it, right?" That night, I rewrote my will. I made sure Caleb would be taken care of. That this house, the house I had scrubbed and painted and cried in and cooked in for over 50 years, would never fall into the hands of anyone who didn't cherish it. I also recorded a statement. I sat on the couch, looked into Caleb's phone camera, and spoke like I was leaving a message for the world. I told them who I was, what I'd lived, and how it felt to be betrayed by the one person I thought would protect me in old age. I didn't cry, not until the camera was off. 2 weeks passed before I saw Heather again. She didn't come alone. Her lawyer was with her. A thin, tired man with a polished smile and eyes that scanned the room like it was a crime scene. "Mother," Heather said, as if we were strangers meeting at a bus stop. We wanted to check on you. Of course, I said softly. Come in. Caleb was upstairs. Miriam was on her way, just a block away. We'd planned this carefully. They sat. Her lawyer opened his briefcase. I'm here to propose a peaceful resolution, he said, as if I had declared war. Heather didn't look at me. She focused on a vase in the corner. One she'd gifted me 10 years ago, back when she still called me every morning. I'm listening, I said. They offered terms. A supervised transition to an assisted care facility. An amendment to the property title that would give her joint ownership. Monthly visits if I cooperated. Heather's lawyer finished his monologue and looked at me with a gentle, condescending smile. Then came the knock. I opened the door and let Miriam in. She didn't smile. She sat down across from them and pulled out our file documents, timelines, voice recordings, notarized statements, and my revised will. The room shifted. Heather's lawyer paled. We're not negotiating, Miriam said flatly. We're documenting. Everything. Heather's lips quivered. You're doing this to me? She hissed, eyes finally locking with mine. I leaned forward. You did it to yourself, Heather. I begged you over and over to see me. Really see me. But all you saw was a house. A bank account. A burden. She looked like she might cry. I hoped she would. Not because I wanted her to hurt, but because tears meant there was still something human left inside her. They left soon after. Her lawyer mumbled about contacting the court. Miriam and I exchanged glances. You're stronger than most people half your age, she told me before she left. I nodded, though the truth was I felt ancient. Not in my body, but in my spirit. Days passed, then weeks. The case began its slow crawl through the legal system. Caleb stayed close, faithful and steady. Heather tried to call me once, then didn't try again. And something strange began to happen. People came out of the woodwork. Neighbors, church friends, even the woman who worked at the pharmacy downtown. All of them told me similar stories, parents isolated, dismissed, quietly erased by their adult children. Some were worse than mine. Some ended in courts. Others in hospital rooms, or worse. I started speaking at church luncheons. I told my story not with bitterness, but with clarity. And the more I told it, the more women and men came to me. Eyes wide, voices cracking, whispering, me too. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't afraid anymore. One day, I looked out the window and saw Caleb standing in the yard, pulling weeds like he had 100 times as a child. He looked up at me and grinned. That smile told me everything I needed to know. Yes, I had been betrayed. Yes, I had almost been erased. But I was still here. And I would not be forgotten. Not by myself. Not by the people who mattered. Not ever. I spent the next few days revisiting old photo albums, trying to make sense of where things had gone wrong. Pictures of Heather at 6, gap-toothed and hugging her new puppy. Her in her graduation gown, eyes shining with ambition. Her holding Caleb the day he was born, swaddled in that blue hospital blanket. I saw a mother in those photos, a daughter who once looked at me with nothing but love. What changed? Did I push her too hard after her father died? Was I too strict? Or was it the way I leaned on her in my later years that made her resent me? It's strange how quickly guilt tries to make a home in your bones, even when you've done nothing to deserve it. One evening, I took a walk through the backyard. The hydrangeas Caleb and I planted in the spring had begun to bloom soft pink and blue clusters bursting from deep green leaves. I remembered Heather once telling me they were boring old lady flowers. I smiled. Maybe they were, but they were mine. That night, I wrote Heather a letter. Not a legal one. Not angry. Just words I needed her to read. Heather, I don't know if you'll ever truly understand what you did. Maybe you think I betrayed you by fighting back. But I need you to know that what you said on that call broke me in ways I didn't think I could break anymore. Not because you asked. Not because you deserve it. But because I won't carry this anger with me. I don't have time left for bitterness. I hope you find the woman you were before all this. I hope Caleb doesn't forget that version of you. And I hope you never have to feel what I felt that day. Mom. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the drawer of the hallway table. I didn't know if I would ever give it to her. Maybe that wasn't the point. A week later, the court date was set. The suit was officially filed: misrepresentation, financial coercion, and elder fraud. Miriam advised me to prepare for everything. Countersuits, public scrutiny, and the likelihood that Heather would fight with everything she had left. But I was ready. Not because I wanted to win, but because I needed the truth recorded, documented, validated. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about dignity. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. My good coat. The pearl brooch my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. My hands trembled slightly as I pinned it on, but I stood tall. Caleb drove me downtown. He wore a suit too dark blue, pressed, handsome. He kept looking at me like I was someone more than just his grandmother. Like I was someone brave. The courtroom was cold and beige and impersonal. Heather sat across from me, eyes red-rimmed, but her jaw clenched like stone. She didn't look at me until the judge asked us both to speak. Heather's lawyer began with a rehearsed monologue about misunderstandings and concerned caregiving. He painted her as a devoted daughter overwhelmed by the realities of caring for an elderly parent. Then came my turn. Miriam stood beside me as I spoke, but I didn't need her words. I told the court what I'd lived, what I heard, what Heather planned. I described the late-night whispers, the false paperwork, the betrayal stitched into everyday conversations. I told them about the recorder, the documents, the will she tried to alter behind my back. And when I was done, I didn't cry. I just stood there, a woman who had been seen. Heather said nothing. Her lawyer mumbled something about further statements, but the silence between us was heavier than any testimony. The judge didn't rule that day. These things take time. But I knew in my bones I had done the right thing. And something remarkable happened after that. The case made local news. A small article, buried deep in the Metro section. Elderly woman files suit against daughter over property dispute, citing abuse. A few days later, a news team reached out. Then another. At first, I said no. But then I thought about the women at church. The pharmacist. The whispered Me Too-s. So I said yes. And I spoke. I told my story on a local morning segment. Not for fame, not for vengeance, but because I wanted to look into the camera and say, you're not crazy. You're not alone. And you have the right to be safe, even from your own family. The response was overwhelming. Letters, emails, flowers on my doorstep. One note came from a woman in Ohio. You saved me, she wrote. I was about to sign over my house to my son. I'm getting a lawyer now. I cried when I read that. Not because I felt powerful, but because I realized I had turned pain into something useful. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Caleb, he turned to me and said, Grandma, I think you changed something. I looked at him. What do you mean? I don't know. It's just you didn't let this destroy you. And maybe now someone else won't be destroyed either. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Maybe we saved each other. Life didn't become perfect. Heather still hadn't spoken to me. The legal process dragged on, but I was no longer afraid to live alone. No longer afraid to be forgotten. No longer afraid to speak my truth even if my own daughter refused to hear it. One night, near the end of summer, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it slowly. It was Heather. No lawyer. No briefcase. Just her, standing on the porch with a grocery bag in one hand and eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. She didn't say much. Just, I brought your tea. The chamomile you like. I didn't move. She looked down. I don't expect anything, Mom. I didn't know who else to be today except your daughter. Something cracked inside me then. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something warmer than rage. Softer than pain. I stepped aside. She came in. We drank tea in silence. I didn't promise her anything that night, but I left the drawer open. The letter still sat there, waiting. Maybe someday, I'd hand it to her. Maybe someday, she'd read it. And maybe, just maybe, you could find each other again. The next morning was gray and overcast, with soft rain tapping at the windows. Heather had stayed for a few hours the night before, barely speaking except to ask where I kept the sugar. I didn't press her. I knew that kind of silence, the kind loaded with unspoken guilt and fear, needed to sit for a while before it could loosen. She left before midnight, but something about her presence lingered in the house. The air felt thicker, heavier, and memories hung in every corner. I wasn't sure what she wanted. I didn't trust her motives. Part of me wondered if this was another performance, an effort to make herself look better in court. But another part, one I hadn't let speak in a while, whispered, what if she's really sorry? What if she's trying to come back? The court date was still 3 weeks away. That meant 3 more weeks of waiting. 3 more weeks of lawyers and paperwork and not knowing what version of my daughter might show up at the front door. I didn't have to wait long. She came again that Friday. This time, she brought dinner takeout from the Thai place I liked downtown. She didn't sit right away, just hovered by the kitchen island, fiddling with napkins, opening and closing the bag like she was searching for words in the rice containers. "I remembered you like the yellow curry," she said finally. I nodded. "That's kind of you." She sat down slowly, her eyes flickering up to meet mine, then darting away. "I didn't come to talk about court." "Then why are you here, Heather?" She winced, not at the sharpness of the question, but at hearing me say her name without warmth. "I don't know," she said after a while. "I guess I miss you. And Caleb keeps telling me I need to face what I did. So here I am." I studied her carefully. Her hair was still dyed that deep mahogany shade she liked, but there were gray strands now. Her skin had lost some of its glow. Stress etched deep lines near her eyes. She looked older than I remembered. Facing something means more than showing up with curry. "I know." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Her hands trembled as she placed it on the table. "I wrote you something." I stared at it, heart suddenly pounding. "Why now?" "Because I haven't been able to sleep," she whispered. "Because when I talk to Caleb, he doesn't sound like my son anymore. He sounds like someone who's already chosen you." I picked up the envelope. It was unsealed. I took the letter out slowly and began to read. "Mom, I don't know how to write this without sounding like a coward, because that's what I've been. I've been hiding behind lawyers and excuses and my own bitterness for a long time. When Dad died, I got angry. I know it didn't look like that from the outside, but I was furious that he left mean that you leaned so hard on me afterward. I resented it, even as I smiled through it. I know that's not your fault. I see that now. But back then, it felt like the whole world became my responsibility overnight, and I didn't want it. And when you got older, I didn't know how to deal with that either. I kept thinking if I could just fix everything, get the house in my name, control the finances, plan ahead, I'd stop being afraid of losing you too. But I crossed a line. I used your trust against you. I manipulated you. I thought I could justify it as being responsible. But really, I was just afraid of having nothing. You gave me everything, and I tried to take more. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not through court filings. I'm sorry, Mom. Heather." By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. I folded the letter slowly and looked at her. "This doesn't undo what you did," I said softly. "I know, but it's a start." Heather's eyes welled with tears, and she nodded. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't push for more. She just sat with me in that quiet moment, letting it breathe between us. I didn't say I forgave her. Not yet. But I didn't ask her to leave either. Over the next week, she returned again and again. Sometimes with groceries. Sometimes with stories from her work or a movie she saw. Once, she brought Caleb and they sat on the porch, laughing about a memory from when he was 7 and convinced the cat could talk. It was awkward at first. Then something shifted. Heather stopped talking about herself and started asking about me. "How's the arthritis been?" she asked one evening, rubbing my hand gently. "Still a stubborn thing," I answered, watching her fingers linger where they once hadn't dared. Another day, she saw the letter I had written her, the one I'd tucked away weeks ago. I had left the drawer open again, this time on purpose. She saw the envelope, her name in my handwriting. "Is that for me?" I nodded. She reached for it, but stopped. "Do you want me to read it now?" "No," I said. "Not until after the hearing." She looked confused. "Why?" "Because if this is real, Heather, if you mean what you wrote, I want to see what you do when you don't get what you want." Her face softened. "Fair." Then came the court day. The second one. This time, Heather arrived early. She wore no makeup, no fancy suit, just simple clothes and that nervous daughter smile I hadn't seen in years. In the courtroom, Miriam leaned over and asked, "Are you ready to speak again?" I nodded. But before I could rise, Heather stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice firm, "I'd like to withdraw my countersuit." The room fell quiet. "I came into this case with the wrong heart," she continued. "I claimed my mother was unstable, but the truth is, I was the one spiraling. I've made decisions I deeply regret. I tried to control her life out of fear, and in doing so, I disrespected everything she is." The judge blinked. "Are you prepared to settle, Ms. Lawson?" "I'm prepared to return full ownership of the house. I'll sign any paperwork necessary. And I'd like to ask the court to dismiss the financial claims if my mother agrees." Miriam's eyes narrowed, cautious. But I spoke first. "I agree to dismiss the claims," I said, my voice steady, "as long as the documents are finalized under Miriam's supervision." Heather nodded. "Of course." The judge leaned back in his chair. That's an unusual resolution, but it's yours to make. And with that, the courtroom quieted again. But this time, it wasn't a silence of fear. It was peace. We walked outside together, Heather and I. The sun had broken through the clouds, spilling golden light onto the courthouse steps. I turned to her. "Why now?" I asked. "What made you really change?" She hesitated, then pulled something from her purse. It was the letter. Mine. "I read it last night," she said. "I know you told me to wait, but I couldn't. And after I finished it, I just sat there sobbing like a child. Because I realized I was trying to become the kind of woman you warned me about. The kind of woman who forgets who she comes from." I exhaled, heart aching. "I didn't write that to fix you," I said. "I wrote it to free myself." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Well, it did both." We drove home in silence. Not the heavy kind, not the fearful kind, but the silence of something rebuilding itself, gently and slowly. When we arrived, Caleb was waiting on the porch. I looked at the mother and son and felt something click back into place. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was ours. And for the first time in a long, long while, it was enough.